Hello again and welcome back to part 2 of the Pretty Bobble baby cardigan. I'm going to carry on from where we left off on part 1, still using the 5mm hook and double knit yarn. So in part 1 we worked the yoke, so you should have the yoke of your cardigan to carry on with part 2. If you want to make a bigger cardigan, as we discussed in part 1, you could use a 6mm hook and a slightly thicker yarn like an Aran weight. So carrying on with the yoke here, we're now going to start working on the skirt. So it's a pattern repeat of shells that go all the way along this yoke here. As always, we're going to start with a 3 chain. That's going to count as the first double. So there we've got the first stitch done. We're now going to skip a stitch. Just get my bearings, 1 second. And then work the first shell. So we're only going to skip 1 stitch here for this first shell, and then into the next stitch we're going to work 5 doubles. 1, 2, 3, excuse me, 4 and 5. Oops. We're going to skip 2 stitches and then work the next shell into the next stitch. So again, it's just 5 doubles. 3, 4 and 5. So we're going to carry all the way along the row, skipping 2 stitches. Just raise so that you can see a little bit better. Skipping 2 stitches and working 5 doubles into the next stitch. So we're going to work this same pattern repeat all the way along. So if you want to pause the video at this point and work along this row with the 5 double crochet shells with 2 skipped stitches in between until we get to the other side, and I'll meet you at that point. So I've worked all the way to the other side, working the 5 double crochet shell with the 2 skipped stitches in between, and we end with, just redo that last stitch. So we've got 1 stitch that we're going to skip at the end, and then we're going to work a double into that 3 chain space. So at the end of this round you will have 33 shells going along this row. So if you just want to check that you've got the 33, excuse me, we can now start on the next row. So we're going to work 3 chain as always, which counts as our first stitch. We're going to work a front post double around all 5 of these stitches here. So yarn over, go behind the 5 stitches, pick up the loop, pull through and finish off the double, and that's formed the first bobble there. We're now going to work 4 doubles into the hole, which is this here, that's formed in this bobble. So just work 4 regular doubles, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So that's giving us 5 stitches altogether. We've got the front post that we did around the stitches and the 4 separate doubles that we've done into that same stitch. We're going to repeat that over the next 4 shells. So yarn over, front post double around the bobble, and then another 4 doubles into the hole that's formed there. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then again over the next shell, exactly the same. So working over the next 4 will give us 5 new shells, and that's going to form the front of the cardigan. Again over the next one, and work 4 doubles into that same hole there. So we've got 4, we're going to do the last one, and that then will form the front. There's the front post double, and then follow that by 4 doubles. So we've done 5 altogether. We're now going to skip the next 6 shells, and that will be where the sleeve will sit. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So we're going to work into the 7th shell, which is this one here. So skip 6 shells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to work a front post double around the 7th. Just leave those to the front there. So front post double around that 7th shell, and then do the 4 doubles into this shell here. So we're now going to work exactly the same over the next 10 shells. So we'll have 11 bobbles after we've done this next part. So we had 5 bobbles there for the first front. We're going to do another 10 along this row. So I'll work a few more with you, and then you can pause the video and carry on. So there we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we'll always have 5 doubles altogether in each of the bobbles. So we've got the front post double followed by 4. Again, front post around the shell, and then work the 4 doubles into that space. So if you want to pause the video at this point, and I'll meet you when we get 11 bobbles for the back. Just make sure that you've got the 5 stitches into each of the bobbles, and I'll see you when we get 11 of these bobbles. So I've now got 11 bobbles that are going to form the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we're going to do exactly the same as we did before to form the gap for the sleeve. We're going to skip 6. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and that leaves us with 5 shells that we're going to work around. I'll just show you in detail again where the hole is that we're going to work the other 4 doubles into. It's this here. So into that space we'll work the 4 normal double crochets. Then we're going to do the same again on the last 4 shells here. So from post double and follow that with 4 doubles. And then onto the last shell, we're going to work the front post double and the 4 doubles, and that will leave us with the chain 3, which was the starting stitch on the previous row. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we're going to work a double into the top of that 3 chain so that we end the row with a double. So we've now separated the yoke into 2 fronts and a back. So onto the next row. We're now going to work over these shells here. So we've got 3 chain to start, and that counts as the first excuse me, as the first double. So we're going to skip 2 stitches of this shell, and we're going to work a shell into the 3rd stitch, which is the middle stitch. So we're going to do 5 doubles. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. We're going to skip over to the middle double of the next shell here. So we're going to skip the 2 stitches from this shell, the 2 first stitches of the next shell, and we're working 5 doubles into the center stitch of the shell. Skip the 2 stitches here and 2 stitches there, so we're skipping 4 stitches altogether and then working a shell into that center stitch of the next shell. and then again skip 4 stitches, work a shell into the next stitch. And again into the next shell, going to work a shell into that middle stitch of the 5. We're just going to carry on. This is the pattern repeat for this row, and every other alternate row will be exactly the same. We're just going to work a shell into the center of the previous shell. Skip the last 2 stitches of the shell and the first 2 stitches of the next one, and again work a shell. So if you want to pause the video again at this point and work all the way along, this forms the next row for the pattern repeat. So you'll have a shell underneath each of the bobbles on the right side there, and I'll meet you when we get to the end of the row. Now working the last shell with 5 doubles, and then we'll join, we'll do the last stitch into the top of the 3 chain here that we had as the start of the previous row. So just work 1 double into that last stitch. So each stitch will start and end with a double, but at the beginning it will be the 3 chain. So we're now ready to start the pattern repeat over again. So on this next row, instead of working 5 and then skipping stitches, we're just going to work the bobble into each stitch all the way along. So I'll start that off for you. We've got 3 chain to start, and then we're going to go straight into this first shell with a front post double around the shell, followed by the 4 doubles into this hole that the front post double has formed. So we've got 4 doubles into that space there, and it will give us 5 doubles altogether. We've got the front post double and then the 4 regular doubles, and we're just going to do the same again onto the next shell. So we're now, as you can see, forming the second row of bobbles there. So there's only the 2 rows to the pattern. The row where we form the bobbles, and then the following row is working a shell into the middle of this shell that we're creating here. So again, a front post around, followed by the 4 doubles into that space. So we're just going to carry on working these 2 rows until the cardigan is as long as you want your cardigan to be. On the original one, as you can see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of bobbles, and then we've got the final row of shells there at the bottom that gives it a scalloped edge. So if you want to carry on, pause the video, carry on working on this set of stitches until you've worked your 5 sets of bobbles. If you want it to be slightly longer, by all means do another 2 rows. If you want the cardigan to be a longer cardigan, and I'll show you now how to work in the sleeves. So I've only done 2 of the bobble rows here just to save time so that we can get back on to where the sleeves go, but obviously you'll work the rest of your skirt part of the cardigan. So for the sleeves, we're going to start with the row that forms the bobbles because we did the row of shells that we skipped. So we're going to work on the right side of the cardigan. Just snip the end of that yarn off there. We're going to start with a slip knot onto the hook. And we're going to start with a standing front post double around this first shell of the sleeve. So we've got the the yoke here, and we've got the 6 stitches that we skipped. So to do a standing front post double, we're going to yarn over, go behind the shell, pick up the loop, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2, and again we're going to do the 4 doubles. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then exactly the same again with the next shell, working the front post double followed by the 4 doubles, and we're going to do that on all 6 of these shells. Making sure that you've got the 4 doubles worked into that space. On to the next one. And then again onto that last shell. And work the front post double around that stitch, the shell, sorry, and the 4 doubles, 1, 2, 3 and 4. And that brings us then to the piece between the bobbles from the yoke itself. So I'm going to work into this space here 2 doubles, and then we're going to join with a slip stitch to that first shell. We now need to work from the other side, so we're going to turn the work around so that we're working on the inside of the sleeve, and we're going to work 3 chain, and that's going to count as the first double, and then we're going to work a double into the second double of those 2 doubles that we had. Oops. That ended the previous row. So we've got the 3 chain that's counting as the first double, and then a double into that next stitch. We're now going to go across to the next shell, and we're going to work into the middle stitch of the shell and work 5 doubles to form the next shell. And then skip the 4 stitches, and again we're going to work 5 doubles into that next stitch. Skip 4 stitches, and we're going to work 5 doubles into the next stitch, which is the center stitch of the previous shell. And just do that all the way around on this wrong side. Oops. We've got the final shell, so we've got 6 shells still for the sleeve. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the final shell we work into that last shell there. And again we're going to finish this round by working a double into the top of the 3 chain. I'll just move that over slightly. So we've got a double into the top of the first chain there, and we're going to work a double into that last double there. So underneath the sleeve we'll have 2 stitches on each row, as well as the 6 shells. So we're now going back onto the right side. We're going to slip stitch across, we're going to work 3 chain again to start the next row, and a double into the double, and then we can start again with the bobble row. So we're going to work the front post double around the shell, and again 4 stitches. Going to front post double around the next shell and work 4 doubles. We do the same around each of the 6 shells. So working the sleeves is slightly different because we're working on the front and the back for alternate rows. Oops, forgot to do the front post around that one first. So once we've done the 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we come again to the 2 stitches that we started the row with. So again we're going to join into the top of that first stitch, which is the 3 chain, with a slip stitch, and then we're going to turn to the wrong side again. We're going to work 3 chain, and then we're going to go straight into the center of the shell and work the 5 doubles to form the next shell for the next row. Straight onto the next shell and work 5 doubles into that middle stitch of the shell. And again into the next one. Just unravel the wool there. We've got 3, there's 4 and 5. Again the same into the next shell. And then into the final shell we're going to work 5 doubles into the middle stitch. And then the last stitch will be a double into this double that forms the 2 stitches that are sat in the middle there. And then we join again with a slip stitch into the top of the first stitch with a slip stitch. So you can carry on working the bobble rows for the sleeves, and as you end with the shell row, I'll show you how to finish off. On the sleeve, on the sample that I've done here, I've worked 3 full bobble rows, and then there's the shell row, but for this just for the tutorial, I'll just imagine that we've done the 3 rows of bobbles. So the next row is going to be the right side again, and we're just going to work 2 chain. We're going to work a half double into the next stitch. We're now going to work a half double into the center stitch of the shell. We're going to work a half stitch between the shells, a half stitch into the middle of the shell. When I say a half stitch, I do mean a half double, sorry. A half double in between, a half double into the middle stitch, a half double in between, a half double into the center stitch, half double in between, half double into the center, half double in between, a half double into the center, and then we're back to the first stitch, which is the 3 chain from the previous row, or the double, and we're just going to do a half double into that one. Join into that 3 chain with a slip stitch. We're going to turn to the wrong side, and I'm just going to work another row of half doubles, 1 half double into each stitch as you can see there. If you want the sleeve to be a little bit longer, you could do a double, but I think a half double is enough. So 2 chain works as the first half double, and then we're just going to work a half double into every half double from the previous row, and it just gives it a nicer finish and it brings the sleeve in. So just working all the way around, working a half double into every half double that we did on the previous row. Don't skip any stitches there. And then we're just going to join into that first stitch with a slip stitch, fasten off the yarn and pull through, and that will form the sleeve. But obviously on your cardigan the sleeve will be a longer sleeve. It will have 3 rows of bobbles. Again, if you want the sleeve to be longer, if you've done the skirt part longer, by all means do an extra 2 rows so that you've got 4 bobble rows. So you'll find underneath the sleeve we've got the 2 stitches here. If you feel that there's a big gap, the 3 gaps there, you can just take a length of yarn and just stitch those 3 together. Just do a little stitch to join the holes, but once the cardigan is on you wouldn't actually see those gaps, but if you prefer you can actually put a little stitch just to hold those together. So the only thing left now to do is the 2 bands that run along the front of the cardigan, and these are literally just working a double into each of the stitches all the way along. So I'll just show you, starting here at the top. I'll just get a new ball of yarn for this. So I will always start along the top, so I'm going to work in a standing double into that first space there, and then depending which side you want the buttonhole, as you can see I've done a chain on this one to form a buttonhole. I'm only going to put 1 button on this one. So we're going to work into that first stitch, and then we're going to work into the stitch itself. So we've gone around the bar of the stitch, we're now going to work into that stitch itself, into the bar of the next stitch, and then into the stitch itself, into the bar of the next stitch, and into the stitch itself. We're just going to do that all the way down the front. You can see how it sits on the yoke itself, that we've got a buttonhole band, and then when we get down to the skirt part, again we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to work into the bar and then into the stitch, into the bar of the next, and then into the stitch. We're just going to carry on all the way down like so, so that we've got a buttonhole band. And then on the other side we're going to start from the bottom and work upwards so that we've got the right side of the doubles going up. So we join into the bottom of this first stitch down here. Again, I'll just use a different ball of wool. So we'll start again with a standing double and we'll work into the top of this last stitch of the shell. So I'm going to work a double into there and then a double into that first stitch, a double into the stitch, a double into the bar, a double into the stitch and a double into the bar. I'll just carry on and work all the way up this side and then just show you how I've worked the buttonhole. If you want more buttons along the yoke here, by all means work more chain to form the buttonhole. So if you wanted a buttonhole at the bottom of the yoke, just work 3 chain and go back into that stitch, into the top of the 3 chain and then back into the stitch and just finish with a slip stitch and then work the next double so that you've got the buttonhole chain there. If you're using a bigger button you can use more chains. So into the stitch, into the bar, into the stitch, into the bar, and to space out the buttonholes I would do the next chain at this point here and just join with a slip stitch and then carry on into the next stitch, into the bar, into the stitch, into the bar, and then into this last stitch here I would do another buttonhole there and just join that with a slip stitch and then work the final double, fasten off and pull the yarn through, and then obviously you'll work in all of the ends. So that's the pretty bobble baby cardigan. As you can see, I've got all the ends still to work into this one. And there we have the cardigan. So I do hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.